go ahead and get started. It's my first appearance in the class since I think the first day. So it's good to be back. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sean Hutchinson. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Geography, and I currently serve as the director of the NRES Secondary Major. So I'd like to welcome not only the students in this semester's capstone class, but all of our guests today to our first seminar in our spring NRES Seminar Series. And for our guests, if you want to know a little bit about some of our upcoming talks, I've got that shown here on the screen. And I should say that this other projector might decide to come on at some point during the talk. It's cooling down right now, so we'll see if that works. But we've got a real nice slate of speakers coming in this semester. The early part, I still have a little bit of information to supply in terms of specific titles, but a nice mix of folks from across our campus all talking about different aspects of natural resources and environmental science. So for our guests, I encourage you to come back and help spread the word. I'm really happy today to welcome Jennifer Valenga to class and as our kickoff seminar. I think I had met Jennifer for many years on campus, but we, I think, first met this time last year, about last February, and I was invited to participate in a panel discussion following a play that she put on here at K-State called Forward. And I'm not going to talk anything about Forward, because that probably is going to be a topic of the discussion. But it was about climate change. It was a fascinating play. And I kind of went through, it made a huge impression on me afterwards. And the more I thought about it, I kind of had this, not a gee whiz moment, but for me, kind of a personal revelation, I suppose, about the important and valuable role that artists have in communicating science. So as a byproduct of that, last semester, we had in here for an earlier NRES seminar, Carlos Castellanos, from the Department of Art, who talked about the intersection of environmental art and technology. And I'm real pleased here today to welcome Jennifer. So without further ado.
Thanks for having me. I am, as he said, Jennifer Vellenga. I'm the Associate Director in the School of Music, Theater, and Dance in charge of the theater program. This is my 6th year here, and my research work is on new play development. And my longtime collaborator is Chantal Bilodeau, who is a playwright in New York City, Canadian playwright who's dual citizenship in the US and Canada. And I'll talk a little bit more about her work because I really feel like one of my arms is missing to not have her here because we do so much of our work together. But I just wanted to start, you know this is about artists and climate change. Hopefully you looked at the blog that Chantal curates. And some of you may have seen this already, but I thought I'd just start with, it's not too long, maybe 3 minutes, but I wanted to start with this little piece of art in the Arctic to just get you thinking about artists and the environment. So I'm sure, I'll just leave it on pause. We'll just leave it there. I don't have anything else to show you. I have a reading from the play Forward that I'll read for you, but I just wanted to say that just have you think about what the experience must have been like for that artist to play in that environment. And I've recently started reading the book This Changes Everything by Naomi Klein that was written in 2014. And she presents a lot of amazing facts. In that book, she says, she quotes Lonnie G. Thompson, who's a world-renowned climatologist, and he's a specialist on glacier melt. His quote, and Chantal and I say this all the time when we're speaking together, his quote is, "Climatologists, like other scientists, tend to be a stolid group. We're not given to theatrical rantings about falling skies. Most of us are far more comfortable in our laboratories or gathering data in the field than giving interviews to journalists or speaking before congressional committees. We're speaking out now because global warming presents a clear and present danger to civilization." Chantal got started on her Arctic cycle, which I will talk about in just a moment, because she really felt as if the artists need to respond. If you looked at the Artists and Climate Change blog that she curates, the About section, she talks about this call to action for where are the stories? Where are the artists in all of this? We've got the science, but we need the human stories to bring it forward. And she really took this as a call to action for herself personally. She has a personal mission of making sustainability part of her life's work, but she hadn't really started writing any plays about it. And I felt the same way. I work on development of new plays, so playwrights who are writing something that's never been seen. I direct plays that have already written, but my research is development of new plays. So my talk today is really twofold. It's about the work of artists and climate change, but it's also about collaboration and what it means to collaborate, both for artists and also for scientists and artists. So Chantal had decided for herself that, much like August Wilson, who's was a world-renowned playwright, if you've seen the play Fences, that was his, the movie Fences, it was his a play first. He wrote a canon of works that spanned his entire lifetime about his life and stories of African Americans. And she thought, wow, I'm really just writing these plays one at a time about what interests me in the moment, but I don't have a body of work that contributes in some great way. And she's also a translator. I said she's Canadian and a US citizen as well. And she's bilingual. French is her first language, so she does a lot of translation work. And the person that she translates for from French to English, she started realizing that his body of work said something about the world, and she thought, that's what I want to do, and what do I have to say? So then she thought it needed to be on climate change, and she at first said she was going to write 6 plays about climate change in the Arctic, about the stories of the people in the Arctic. Being Canadian, Canada touches the Arctic. She would write 6 plays about climate change, 1 story for each country that touches the Arctic, and then later realized, well, actually there's 8 countries that touch the Arctic, so that has expanded into 8 plays about the Arctic, the stories of people and how the climate is changing in those places. So she started, oh gosh, I don't even know, I can't even remember the year. It has to be 2009 or 8 or something like that. She started her first play called Sila, which means breath, and that was set in Canada. And so she took a journey. Canada was obviously one of the easier countries for her to get into. She took a trip there and she listened to the stories of the people, and she decided another mission of hers was to include an artist of the region in her work. So she asked a throat singer, an indigenous throat singer, to be a part of writing the poetry for Sila, which, as I said, means breath. And so she wrote that play and got a number of awards for it. Shortly after, or during that time, I took a new play project to New York City with a group of students from Kansas State and called Chantal. We were grad students together. That's how I knew her originally. We were at Ohio University in the late 90s and beginning of 2000. And I called her and said, hey, I've got this play going on, would love to meet with you and have you see this play. And she came, she showed up. So message number 1 is, showing up, being there. she showed up, and we had a drink afterwards and talked about the play. And I said, hey, what work are you doing right now? And she said, well, I've got this really ambitious project that's going to take me a decade or more, and I really want us to collaborate at some point. And I thought, yeah, I don't know if that project, but wow, the getting the stories out about climate change are really important. I don't know if I'm the right director for it or not, but that sounds really exciting. So fast forward to me coming back to K-State, and I connected with a local individual who's a freelance, Clay Myers-Bowman. He's a freelance producer and cares about sustainability. And we got to talking, and he said, wow, that's a project I'd kind of like to work on, and I want to lend my skills as a producer and would like to branch out into other areas. And so I said, yeah, you know, maybe that'll work out at some point. Well, then he said something. I knew that Chantal's next country she wanted to go to was Norway. She had taken a trip on, she sent me the name of it so I would get it right. She took a trip on a ship through the Arctic with other artists and educators to just experience the Arctic on a ship. And from that, the purpose was to give them an opportunity to respond to what's happening. Much like, this is why I played this pianist at first, is they were on this ship experiencing that, and then they were to respond to that work. They went to Svalbard, and it was the Arctic Circle tour for artists and educators. So there were photographers and filmmakers, and of course she was there, and she started thinking about a story that she could come up with. She was reading a biography about Fridtjof Nansen, who you may or may not know about. If you don't know about him, he's like saying George Washington in Norway. I only know that because when we went to one of our 2 trips to Norway, we were working with, and I'll get back to this in a second, but we were working with some actors in Oslo, and one of the lines in the play was, you know, Fridtjof Nansen, our great Norwegian explorer. And they laughed, and we said, what's the matter with that phrasing? And they said, well, that's fine for the US, but in Norway, this is like saying George Washington. You'd never say, our first president, George Washington. You know, we know that information. So anyway, she read this biography about Fridtjof Nansen, who was this great explorer and had the record of getting the closest to the North Pole, and she thought that this seemed like an important story to be set in Norway. So back to Clay Myers-Bowman, this freelance producer, we got to talking, and he said that he had a foreign exchange student coming to Manhattan to live with them, and he was from Norway, and his mother was the president of Norwegian Actors Equity Association and was an artistic director for a theater. And I thought, I wonder if there's something we can do there. And my mind's always thinking about collaboration. So I called Chantal and I said, I don't know where you are in this process. And she said, yeah, the next thing I have to do is go visit Norway. So we decided to collaborate, Clay and Chantal and myself, and we all wrote grant proposals in different areas, and K-State was really generous, and I got some funding to do a research trip to Norway with Clay and Chantal and myself, and I believe that was 14, December of 2014. So in December of 2014, with just a few things written for this play, we all traveled to Norway. We had a few meetings set up. One was with the U.S. Embassy in Norway, and we connected with people we knew through some networks. We knew we were going to have a small reading in Oslo with a group of actors of the play as it stood. It wasn't finished yet, but we knew we needed some input from the people of the region. So we did that reading in Oslo, and then we took, actually the other way around. We went into Tromsø, which is one of the most northern cities in Norway, and it's in the actual Arctic Circle. And we, you know, did what you do in this day and age. We went to Airbnb or hotels.com or something like that, and we found a place to stay, and there's a regional theater there that's probably, you know, similar to Kansas City Repertory Theater, if you know that company. And we said, hey, we're coming and we'd like to talk to someone. So we set up some meetings. We toured their spaces. We told them a little bit about what we wanted to do. And they said, yeah, this sounds really interesting. Maybe we could put you on the schedule for one of our workshop events, in another year or something, because theater's scheduled pretty far out. And we thought, there's no way that will happen, but that's really great if it could. So we met with them and moved on to Oslo and did a reading, and we invited a lot of people to that reading to visit and respond. We had one of the actors had an uncle in Norway, almost, at least, I don't know, this is probably not a right number, but a large, I was going to say 50%, I can't say that for sure, but a large majority of people work in the oil industry. It's a small country. It got very wealthy in the 60s. In 1969, actually, they hit oil. They'd been drilling for a long time, and they were just about to give up. We learned this story in Oslo, talking to that community, and then the scene became a scene in the play. But they were just about to give up, and then on Christmas Eve in 1969, they hit oil in the Arctic Ocean, and that changed their economy. They had gone from a very poor, sort of relying on potatoes and farming, to having this oil boom. And so anyway, we had this play reading, and we had some people from the oil industry and some conservationists. We had both parties that were there, and they gave us a lot of feedback about how we could make the stories more accurate to the country. And the play goes backwards in time. There's one story, well, it used to go backwards in time, so we're still working on it. In fact, the next time we're doing a reading in New York City in May. But the storylines is the Fridtjof Nansen storyline of his exploration, his exploratory visit into the Arctic to try to find the North Pole, and his journey with those explorers. And then backwards in time, it goes from 2014, and it goes backwards, not exactly every decade, but it hits on markers in history, like the 1969 oil find. It goes backwards with these little scenes about something about the environment that was a marker in history. And then they meet. And running through this storyline is the character of Ice. So Ice is personified, and she sings, and she's asking for her own preservation. And so Nansen is trying to find Ice and falling in love with her, and Ice is calling to humanity to make a change. So these actors that we worked with and the Norwegians gave us some feedback on how we could make it more accurate to the environment. We came back, we worked on it, we actually did a reading at K-State and refined it a little bit more. And then this company in the Arctic, this it's called Hålogaland Theater Company in Tromsø, Norway. They invited us back the following year in November, or it might have been November, December, that's how the trips went. November 2014, December of 2015, they invited us back to workshop the play with some of their actors. It was, you think, Norway in November or December, and it's dark most of the time. And we kept hoping that we would see the Northern Lights because that's part of the play and so much a part of Norwegian culture. We didn't really see them the first time we went, but the second time, one of the artists, so I said that Chantal's very, as am I, very keen to keep an artist from the country connected to each of the plays. We heard about this woman, Agi Petersen, who's with this band called Frost with her husband. Her husband actually won a Norwegian Grammy last year for his techno music. She's a celebrity in Norway, but she had done some work in Spitsbergen, and her family is from that area, and she'd taken the sounds of the Arctic and turned it into an album with voice and live sounds of the Arctic. And we thought this was a really good collaborator for us because she was thinking about the same things we were thinking of with the play, and we thought never in a million years would we get her to invest with us. And I don't mean invest financially, I mean artistically. And she said yes, because she read the play, and she said, yes, I'm also passionate about this. And so we got Agi Petersen there, and she did some sounds, and we actually asked her to play the role of Ice while we were doing the workshop there. And at that point, we knew that we were going to do the premiere or the first round of this production at K-State. So that's what Sean was saying last February. So right now, we open a show tonight. It would have been exactly now, a year ago. We brought Aggie and the dramaturg from Hålogaland Theater, and Chantal came in from New York, and we took K-State students and we did the play as a full production for the first time. And it was really exciting to have all of those collaborators there and to hear Aggie's music that she composed and have the students be a part of that. So The part of collaboration, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, there's so much to say, but the part on collaboration is really about Chantal showing up to something I was doing, not for any reason except to support the work that I was doing, and us thinking, how could we maybe work together? And then just asking and people saying yes. And that's been a really important lesson and an exciting moment for me to think about how your work speaks to others and how you can bring them into what you're doing. So I can't do the work without Chantal's writing. She can't do the work without me directing. We need a musician, a composer. We need actors. We need all of those things. Theater is a place where we do collaborate. That's what we do all of the time. Which brings me to scientists and artists collaborating together. So Chantal's work has been not only to bring these plays to the stage to just an audience population, but also to go to conferences and to read from her plays and to talk about the role of the artists in climate change. And so she's been doing some of that. Our next venture together, which I hope that we start getting off the ground this summer, is to turn the Artists in Climate Change blog into a podcast. So that perhaps I would be the host, and we could do this at K-State, that we could bring a scientist and an artist into the same room and say, talk about the science, tell us what the facts are, and the artist saying, I've taken this science and I've populated or fertilized with this art, the science that's come out, you know, that's the most recent science, or we just feel that it's important for the artists to get the stories out there because the scientists are not that maybe isn't their strength or their desire. They're working on the facts and the science, and we're working on telling the stories of human beings. And so that kind of collaboration, again, I don't really know what all of your areas are, but I would love for you to think about collaboration and think outside the box on where you can engage different people in the work that you do, whatever your field is. I thought I would tell you what's next in the Arctic Cycle, the cycle of 8 plays on climate change for Chantal, and then I thought I would read for you a little excerpt from Forward, because it was when we did the very first reading at K-State, probably 2013, I think. We had a beginning scene and an ending scene and some actors, some student actors, and a couple of donors, and we just read a little bit of it, and then she filled in the blanks. But this section from the play has remained almost untouched, and I think it's an important reading. Before I read that, I'll say, so CELA, Canada, Arctic, that's really about the indigenous peoples and some of the social political things that are happening in that region, especially with teens and suicide and what it means for their environment and the people who live there as they start to be less populated. So that's that play. And then Forward, I just explained as the backwards and forwards timeline and Fritjof Nansen's exploration tour. Next, Chantal, I got the name again from her. She just took the Tidelines Ferry Tour with the Institute in Sitka in Alaska. So she wanted, the third play will be set in Alaska. So she's taken that journey and she's collaborated with the theater company that's interested in workshopping this play. It's going to be about migration. I will make sure that I get out to you an article. She just sent to me this morning an article that was published yesterday that she wrote about that journey to Alaska. But that play, it sounds like it might be a one-person play about just what's happening with a migration of animals through the change in the climate. I'm not sure the order that things will go, but the rest of the countries, so we've got Canada, Norway, US, we have Russia, Greenland, Iceland, Sweden, and Finland. Yes, thank you. So this is going to take probably her lifetime. You can, as I said, we had 2 scenes in 2013, and we're at 2017, and we're just doing the first workshop in New York City in May. The play is going to be published. CELA has already been published, and Forward's being published, I think, this summer. So I'll read a little excerpt. It's not too long from Forward. And then, as I know we don't have a ton of time, I thought I would open it up to questions really about anything, about the process of working with a play, a new play, about you know, what we did or how this came about. Okay, so the scene, to set the scene, so I should back up and say you may know some of this science. Safe level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is 350 parts per million, and we passed 400 parts per million in I think last March. Global levels of CO2 past that, which can be a marker of major catastrophe in the future. So the reason I tell you that is because that is in this little excerpt. The scene is really the second scene in the play. The first scene is setting up Fritjof Nanson's getting ready to leave his wife and go on this journey. The second scene is a couple, a lesbian couple who are having a baby together. And she tries to make sure she pays attention to what's socially and politically happening in each country. So in 2013, not a big deal. Same-sex marriage is legal and common, and they are having a baby together. So the one woman is pregnant, and she's sobbing, and she's watching something on a screen of a ship just going through the fjords. This is also of the time, because Norwegians, for whatever reason, they have this entertainment, I'll call it, on television, where they watch something in real time that I think to a lot of people would be very boring. Some of the things that they've done is they had a log fire burning for a very long time, and everyone just turned on their TV and watched it over 24 hours or something. This ship, this Hurtigruten kind of tourist ship, was going along the fjords, and they just filmed it going along the fjords. Nothing else was happening. It just, I think another one was they were knitting. They just watched someone knit for 24 hours, and it was on, public television. So this is cultural to them, and that comes up in here. So this pregnant woman is watching this ship go through the fjords very silently, and her partner, her wife, comes home and says, "Why are you sitting in front of the television, and why are you sobbing?" And she can't really speak through her tears, and when her partner finally says to her, "I need to understand what you're saying," she says this: "All I see is a ship sailing very slowly along the Norske kysten, and I find it rather soothing, like looking at a log fire. Didn't you hear it was all over the news? We passed the threshold, 400 parts per million. We can't stabilize the climate anymore. We can't stabilize anything anymore. Yet all I can do is sit here and watch TV, 12 hours straight, Norske crews broadcast live, no commercials, no editing, nothing. Just life unfolding one peaceful second at a time. And I watch this ship sail past mountains and fjords and glaciers, sail into skies flooded with colors, blue, pink, orange, yellow, and all those other ones. The really subtle ones for which we don't even have names. God's great canvas. I tell myself a masterpiece started billions of years ago and slowly refined, day after day after day, molecules assembled and reassembled, in pairs, in trios, until they are right, until everything is just so, until every piece is so deeply embedded into every other piece that you can no longer tell them apart." So this is, and the scene continues on, but that was Chantal's feeling of being on that ship and seeing these colors and understanding that this is the thing that we might be losing. And she's got this baby, and she's going to have this child in this world that she may not see the world as her parents are perceiving it. So when we did the work at K-State, and we had talkbacks, and Sean was there for one of them, and maybe you'll have something to say about that too, but we really like to hear how people are feeling about it. And we were a little nervous because artists and scientists do very different things, right? And we were thinking, like, are they going to feel like we were good, we were accurate about the science, which Chantal is excellent at? Did they feel like we told the story well and we reached anybody? And we felt that overwhelmingly our panelists were very positive about the work. And one of my favorite comments was, "I think you guys did in 2 hours what sometimes we can't even accomplish in a semester." And that was just theater, the arts can touch your hearts and your minds in a way that the science can't. So I'm committed as an artist to make that happen, to help scientists get the word out. We'll continue to do that work on our own, but we really hope that the next phase, while continuing with the cycle of plays, is about engaging scientists and inviting them into our work and hoping that they invite us in to share their work as well. So artists, climate change, and collaboration. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions. And Sean, if you have anything to say, or Dr. Erickson, if I know you saw the play too, if you want to talk about that at all, I'm happy to hear those comments too. Oh, sure.
Questions?
Yes.
I'll make one comment with respect to this. I appreciate your emphasis on the Arctic, but climate change is happening all over the world now, and there are a number of things that are starting to impact us, and one of them is flooding. There was a significant rainfall event in Louisiana about a year ago, and the situation was that one river there crested 5 feet above where it had ever crested before. And so from that standpoint, one of our issues here in Manhattan is our downtown of Manhattan. In 1951, there was about 10 feet of water there, and so the issue of protecting that if our rivers get up 5 feet above where they've ever been before is a concern. The other thing that's happening is drought, and so with drought there are wildfires which impact air quality for people, and so there are things starting to happen, and so it's happening more in the Arctic, but it's happening here as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. One of the things that got me excited when Chantal was here, because I had gone to this civic conversation about climate change in the Great Plains. And I started thinking, we really need to do something here since I'm here and K-State is here. And I hope you'll appreciate that you can't take everything on. So, of course, she's curating the blog for all artists who are doing anything on climate change, but her specific focus is the Arctic. And I can't help that I'm in Manhattan and we're not the Arctic, but I think that this is an amazing point and also something we need to be aware of. And so she's doing that part of the work of connecting artists and scientists with other parts of climate change, because it's not just global warming. You know, so one of the great scenes in her play is about, oh, gee, you know, it's going to be like, hey, last week it was 60 degrees here. That was great for us, except that you think what that actually means. A lot of the population thinks, well, that's not so bad for it to get warmer, but it impacts many, many other things: drought, fires, the water quality, worldwide disease, and the food supply. There's so many ways in which things can be affected. It's just that this particular research for Chantal is about how she can tell the stories of the Arctic and then how that spreads out beyond. And I hope that with the podcast we would be able to invite other artists in and pay attention to what's important for this region especially. Thank you for that. Yeah.
So can you think of it, are there other examples of people like Chantal who have a thematic interest in the environment?
Yeah.
Is that a new thing, kind of?
It's, well, I would say arts all across the board. It was a call to action maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and I have some notes here on it. But it's more and more. Okay, so in 2005 there was an article called "What the Warming World Needs Now is Art, Sweet Art" by Bill McKibben of 350.org. And so he said, you know, where are the books, the plays, the goddamn operas? That was his quote. An intellectual understanding of the scientific facts was not enough. You need to approach the problem with the imagination, with the artists. And I think a lot of artists heard that in 2005, so that's been 12 years ago. Are there artists? Yes, there's lots of documentary. I mean, if you've seen the documentary Chasing Ice, it's been a while now that that's come out. But there are artists who are going out with scientists and documenting what's happening. There are certainly poets and lots of visual art and sculpture. I can think of, gosh, you're going to catch me without an ability to name names, but I can definitely follow up with you on this. But you may have seen the sculptor who put little sculptures of people who were in water and trying to come out of it. And then I think it was Philadelphia did the Waterline Project, where they marked exactly where the water line would happen by a certain time. So there are definitely composers, there are operas, there are thematic, environmental concerts that are happening by all kinds of musicians. So yes, it is. And I think Chantal created this blog, Artists and Climate Change, to help curate is the best word I keep saying, is to pull all that information together so it's in one place. And she's very good about getting guest writers to write comments on what's happening in the art. And I can definitely follow up with you on some lists of a few people that are key in each of those artistic areas. But it is becoming, there will be theater festivals and conferences about sustainability and climate. There's also the Green Action Fund, Broadway's Green Alliance. There we go. Broadway's Green Alliance is the play Peter and the Starcatcher might have been the first play to do this, where they used found objects for their scenic design. And this Green Action Fund, you know, if you know anything about plays, you put it up, you use wood, and you tear it down and throw it away. And it's not always that easy to reuse that material if you want to have an artistic and creative. Same thing with art installation. So we tried very specifically with Forward to use materials that we had in stock. We tried to create some kind of ice-looking pieces, and we used some plastic material that had been saved from another project, and we just reused that. So Broadway Green Alliance is trying to reuse and share their materials. A lot of times Broadway with smaller companies. I know we've made an effort at K-State to try to reuse materials, and you can have college green captains. So I've been putting a call out to our students to say who wants to be a green captain and make sure that our sets and our design elements are sustainable. So that sort of wound around your question, but yes, there are a lot of artists and festivals out there that are trying to bring it to the forefront.
But it was that McKibben paper that was, like you said,
that was pretty key. Yeah, yeah, and the artist went, oh, we can do this, so. Yeah.
What was the name of her blog?
Artists and Climate Change. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you share feedbacks that you're receiving from your audience as you're presenting or doing plays or readings and all of that? So what do you hear? So are people concerned enough about changing climate?
Yeah, I think the most interesting feedback was from the student actors, and I can think of one specific actor who grew up with a family who very staunch deniers of, I guess, global warming, really, but climate change as a whole, who came to it a little bit like, well, I'm cast as an actor, so you have to invest in whatever it is you're working on. But he really changed over the course of time as he started to understand the science of what was really happening, and we were researching the play. And the rest of the students in the project really became our soldiers in the field, and they would go out and talk to other people. We expected some people to be defensive, especially in Kansas, and even we were nervous about the oil employees of oil companies in Norway. And honestly, they were moved by the piece. And in Norway, they were more interested, the ones we saw anyway, were more interested in making sure we got the facts right. And it's obviously going to be slanted a little bit. Her work is about climate change in the Arctic. However, I think scene by scene, and forward anyway, she very clearly puts, she puts deniers in her play. She says that side of the story and allows another character to have that conversation. We did not get the pushback that we were expecting to get. Most people invested in the story and were moved by it. Now maybe they were afraid to come forward and say anything because, of the population. But we were very pleased with the response. I don't know, Sean, if you can think back that far to any response that we got on your talkback night.
Yeah, the performance that I saw, I was thinking of the very same student that you mentioned, but all of the students who spoke commented in some fashion about what they learned, kind of the science that they learned in going through that process. It struck me as it was a real opportunity for them to not only practice their craft, but also reflect on some things that maybe just because life was so busy and people were focused that they hadn't paid attention to.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed to make a personal impact on each of them.
Yeah, so the biggest impact was on the student actors, but at the talkbacks, not much, not anything too negative, really.
So is it fair to say that art, or maybe the meaning behind art, is more acceptable to a broad swath of people than hitting them over the head with scientific communications? And if so, why is that?
Well, I think, we can reach you at the human level. I don't know that everyone is it's too far out. It feels like it's too far away to take action on anything, but when you see the stories of something happening right now and how it's affecting relationship and human beings in the moment, we can project ahead and say this might happen, this is happening, and you take that journey with those artists or those actors, in my case in theater, or in that in that video, or when you go to the museum and you put yourself in there, you see it in a different way. It just goes to a whole different side of your brain, and I think just touches on the human level where the science can't necessarily, unless you're wired to have the science be the thing that hits you. But I think all of it needs to be a part of a collective consciousness so we can make some change. But I think it's about relationship and the human touch of it, personally.
Jennifer, the range of artistic approaches that you were just describing that do something with climate change, no doubt they all take their information from scientists or publications. Do you have the experience that there is a subgroup of approaches where there is a full circle approach, where the people that see the art or experience the art are after that exposed to more factual information, and would that experience be helpful?
You mean, do they experience the art and then continue to educate themselves other ways, or?
Is that being offered, for instance, by giving a short lecture after a play?
Yeah, that's part of the mission of the work. So we try to always do a talk back, and we invite, so every show that we had, maybe not every show, at least half of the shows that we had here, we invited speakers, and we had a panel after the show, so that if we got into the weeds with the science and we didn't have the full knowledge, we have enough to tell the story well, but not the data and not the experience to share the data in that way, then the scientists are there to give a little bit. I remember Dr. Harrington, I think, came and somebody asked him, how is it that are you really depressed about these facts? How do you do the work that you do and not just fall into a deep depression? And he said, there is hope. And part of the story of Forward, which I maybe should have said right away, is the human spirit of innovation. So what made Fridtjof Nansen want to get to the North Pole was wanting to innovate and be an inventor and be the first, an explorer. We need those explorers now. to say, okay, and there's a lot happening that's not necessarily politically or socially getting out into the world, but there's a lot of solutions being happening through innovation. So maybe we can start to get some of those ideas out there. But that whole spirit of trying to inspire others to make a change or find the new thing and find a new way for humans to exist if it really is too late. Did that answer your question? I don't really know if it did.
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
Sort of? Yeah, are we sharing it through science in addition to the play? Yes, by going to conferences, by allowing talkbacks to happen and bringing experts in the field in. And yeah, Dr. Harrington actually wasn't deeply depressed, felt kind of encouraged that there's more awareness now. Now, since November, maybe we feel differently, but at the time, a year ago, we were feeling pretty good. Better, anyway. Yeah.
I had a question about, how was this production made? This is amazing. I saw the Chasing Ice, the one. How was this made? Do you know the history of this?
I don't know the history of this one, but I know it as complicated. If you saw that documentary, it takes a lot of effort and work to get the technology to work in the extreme environment. So I don't know. It would be interesting to see. I'll see if I can look into it and send it on if I can.
And my other comment was more on the current political scenario, like when the scientists are being challenged with this whole climate change concept. Do you think the plays and the art will come forward to make this more plausible to the audience for general people to understand that what can be for the future?
I think that as an artist involved in climate change, what's happening in policy with climate change is also happening to art. So I can't answer that. I would like to think that yes, art can break through, and art will happen no matter what. You look at any culture, actually art thrives in times of turmoil. So do I think it can push through? Yes, but also policy is not on our side right now. So that's my answer.
Well, we are, I hate to stop discussion, but we are pushing up against time, and I'd like to thank, for everyone to thank Jennifer one more time for joining us. Thank you very much.